You're listening to Robinson Ventures Radio, where ingenuity meets innovation.
Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of Robinson Ventures Radio. My name's Cian Robinson. I am the founder and president of Robinson Ventures. And with me today is Mr. Mark Elfers. And Mark is going to take a moment to talk a little bit about himself and then his latest company. So, Mark, you and I met through a partner of ours, a guy named Josh at Adjuvant Behavioral Health, so Josh Myers. You were doing a little bit of work with Josh, and then got to know you there, and then got to be familiar with your background, which is, I believe, you're a Marine. Is that correct? You're always a Marine. You're never not a Marine. How's it
Yeah.
go?
Yeah, once Marine, always Marine, I think some people say. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Tucker and Cian, for having me join the pod. I was a Marine Harrier pilot in my first chapter. Was blessed to be able to do that for over 20 years. My wife and I looked at each other towards the end of that and said, "What is next for us?" I just thought it would be really interesting to try something completely new. So I met a handful of folks at a biotech company called Amgen. They were gracious enough to allow me to join, put me in a place where I could learn, join a biosimilars team, and help them launch a couple products. And I was, on a great team led by great folks at Amgen. Was able to learn a lot and eventually make a small contribution there. But then I left to go to a digital health startup called Blue Note Therapeutics. We were creating FDA approvable mobile applications for patients with cancer related psychological distress, like fear, anxiety, depression, all the things you can imagine one might have as you're going through a cancer diagnosis and treatment. And then I left to create a digital palliative care company with two docs from Mass General. We were really focusing on patients with advanced cancer and pain. And while I was there, I did meet Josh and was fortunate enough to be able to help him get Adjuvant Behavioral Health started. Along the way at Elevate, the digital palliative care company, we met some great investors who had a great idea, a much better idea than we had. We ended up trading our IP and some of our teammates for a position in a company they created called Tuesday Health. And then about a year and ago, I started this company, Greencape, which we'll talk a little bit more about.
I always think about Dr. Atul Gawande and the
Yep.
Checklist Manifesto, because he was a doctor first, but a pilot second, right? And take the acumen of, hey, every time I go to get and into my plane and fly it, I have a checklist that I go through, and they're all go no go checklists, right? And then when it's all go and it's all greenlit, I get in, I take off, and I fly my plane. And I always think of the Harriers. I call it the Harrier jump jet, because to me it was always amazing that there was this plane that could do a vertical takeoff and then it flew, right? And I'm like, does it know it's a plane? That person who's the pilot in that front seat thinking about a certain point in time when it's sort of like the Osprey is the same thing. Is it a helicopter or is it a plane? And it's like
Yeah.
both, right? So
Right.
talk to me about the acumen that you obtained from being a Harrier pilot for 20 years, and how do you use that and that discipline in your companies that you're starting?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I mean, the Harrier is a somewhat complicated airplane because you do have that vertical component, a vertical takeoff and vertical landing component. But what I tell people is that it's for us that learned how to and flew it. It was a learnable skill, a trainable skill. So the Marine Corps had figured out if you had, you know, these kind of innate either physical skills and intellect and vision and hearing, you could be taught how to fly it, and there was a process to learn. So the checklists that you mentioned were, of course, a part of that. And I would just say that it's not only about getting the airplane started pre-taxi, it's pre-takeoff, it's takeoff, it's post-takeoff checklist. It is transition into, from where you are taking off to where you're going to train or where you're going to fight, and then getting the airplane ready to fight, and then kind of bringing it home. So everything you did, you had a way to do it. So you had a process, and that process was developed and vetted and tested not only by the engineers on the ground, well before anyone was flying it, but then after the multiple decades of folks that were flying it. So I think what that kind of taught me is that there usually is a way to do something that has become the best way or the preferred way by an organization. So if you think about building a new digital health product, you might start with, okay, let's talk about what problem there is in this system, whether it be in an outpatient clinic or in a surgery or in an emergency room. Like what problem is this we're trying to solve, and then how do we think we might solve it? Or in internal business operations, you may say, hey, what's the best way to process these invoices and get them paid, or send out these invoices and get them paid by our customers, or raising money, or hiring people. There's always a process. It's either what the best operators do right off the bat, or what people eventually learn how to do is try to find someone who knows the best process and adapt it, so you're not trying to figure it out yourself when you're first learning. And let me pause there, Cian, and see if I'm actually touching on your question or I've wandered off.
No, you haven't wandered off into the wilderness. There are transferable skill sets, right?
For sure.
You were able to take your time, 20 years of acumen. I would have to say you probably were pretty good, when you decided you probably kind of knew how to fly this thing, in the point in time where you're like, okay, peace out, I'm done. I've accomplished what I've accomplished, right? And so you were a subject matter expert in that area. And then it was time to transition, and you were able to take all that you learned and then apply it in the healthcare space, right? And sit there and say, okay, I'm going to go to Amgen first, and I'm going to apply my subject matter expertise here. I'm going to gain additional subject matter expertise while I'm at Amgen, and now I'm going to catch the entrepreneurial bug, and I'm going to step in and I'm going to start my new codes. Most entrepreneurs don't have that discipline. They see a problem, they create a solution, and then sometimes they become like a ping pong ball in a dryer.
Yeah.
And they don't have the discipline to sit there and say, I am going to follow a process, or I'm going to implement processes that enable us to get the MVP, minimal viable product, done.
Mhm.
And I'm going to take it to market. I'm going to see if there's product market fit, and I'm going to do some trial customers. Then I'm going to go back around and iterate on the MVP. And then I'm going to launch it commercially. Then I'm going to get clients, and then I'm going to raise money. Every single one of those steps is a process
Yeah.
inherent in the company.
Lean back and grab a resource like this book, the Startup Owner's Manual, came to me like after startup number 3. I think there was a lot of time that I spent and our team spent trying to create processes. When we were at Elevate, we're really trying to raise money before we had our MVP built. So we in that scenario, we had a clinician who created a mobile application, tested in a clinical study, was found to be efficacious and save money. We're going to raise money off of that. But if you just slowly break down what you said, you have an MVP, you have some trial customers, you have a little bit of baby revenue, you have some proof that the market wants what you have, then you raise. We had this proof of efficacy from this study from several years ago, but we were trying to raise on that. So I think knowing the process and knowing there's a group of people that have gone before you and have learned and have published, multiple how-tos. If you're flying an airplane, when you learn, you're like, okay, these are the steps to turn this airplane on and to taxi it and to fly it. And if you're starting a company, like as you approach that problem initially, like, okay, I have a process and I'm at really phase 0 here as I approach this problem and start to consider creating a company around it.
It's 100% a defined and repeatable process. And what I love about entrepreneurs is they think everything's new, and that we're so unique that we don't need to follow those processes. The successful startup companies that come out the other side, some are like sheer dumb luck, is what I would say, right? The majority of them have gotten the skill and acumen to put the processes in place that allow them to successfully get the product out, get their first clients, get the baby revenue, as you said, get some funding, and then scale the business. And yes, you're going to tweak them a little bit, right? Because every company has its own little flavor to it. You have to have those in place. Otherwise, your company just, they're called zombie companies right now. And I don't know how many of them we see, which is they're just constantly raising on a bridge. And we're going to get there, and we're going to get there, and we're going to get there. And you're like, no, we need to kill the zombie.
Yeah, and maybe that goes to a decision-making process. So in the Marine Corps, we're taught the Marine Corps planning process, and it's a multi-step process that allows you some framework and how you approach new missions or new orders or really any problem that you kind of come across. As soon as an entrepreneur sees a problem, they say, "This is what we need to do," and they start building rather than what the Marine Corps planning process would ask us to do is understand the problem or
Yes.
understand the mission in that first step. So you're really trying to say, okay, what does my boss or what does my boss's boss want us in this organization to do? He's given us this order. It's a few sentences or maybe it's a few pages or a few dozen pages, but what does he want us to accomplish? And then what resources or constraints do we have? What must we do? What tools do we have? How much time do we have? How many folks do we have to help us accomplish this mission? And then we kind of very systematically go through and like build a couple of different ways to accomplish that mission. So courses of action. So here's option one, and we could accomplish the mission this way or this way or this way, and all of them must be pretty different if you're doing the process right. And then we go through a very separate step of comparing the options you've developed against what you're supposed to be doing and the constraints and the restraints you have. And then finally selecting one of those options. That process of approaching a new problem with a framework, I find really helpful, even if you're an entrepreneur and you have a bias towards action and you're maybe a little ready, fire, aim, if you will. You can be like, okay, well, what's our process for
And then
solving
usually it's
problems?
into the foot. On ready, fire, aim, it's
That's
the
right.
foot that gets hit,
Yeah, or
right?
my own personal experience of me actually doing this, like, don't interrupt me. I'm busy charging up the wrong hill, but you're charging up the wrong hill. Like, I know, but I'm making so much progress.
We talk all the time, and when we interview potential clients for Robinson Ventures, specifically who are our younger companies, we sit down with the founder and we want to understand how well they understand the problem they're trying to solve, and are they in love with the problem and are less in love with the solution because they know they have to create it. And then they slowly fall in love with the solution because it is actually truly not charging up the wrong hill. It is truly solving that problem. So 100% agree with you. So with that, I'm going to transition into, are you in love with Greencape? And if so, what is the love story?
My first digital health startup, I joined in 2019. And I think that's where I started to realize, hey, there's way too many patients and not enough skilled, trained caregivers available. And caregivers that do exist are humans. So that means sometimes they have a bad day, sometimes they have poor recall of a patient's diagnosis or prognosis. Sometimes they go on leave, they go on maternity leave, they go on paternity leave, they're not feeling well, they're sick, or they retire, or they just transition out because they decide they don't want to do that. So not only is there too many patients, not enough caregivers, the caregivers have a quality of the care they deliver that suggests there may be a better way to provide care. Blue Note, we were trying to build these mobile applications that could provide cancer-related psychological distress. We were doing something similar at Elevate because we knew patients in receiving palliative or in hospice care, the time between their face-to-face visits allowed a lot of things to change for their disease. So you could have a symptom exacerbation or disease trajectory change, and the next thing you know, you have a patient in the hospital and you had, as a care team, you really had no idea that they were trending in that direction. And had you only known, you could have provided the right intervention at the right time. So when I met Dr. Solomon at the Brigham, he had been seeing the same exact thing in rheumatology. And he had a 6-month wait list, but he was seeing a ton of stable patients. Well, he didn't know they were stable till they showed up. He was like, well, how do we solve this? So about 7 years ago, he said, well, what if I built a mobile patient reported outcomes platform that let me know who were stable before they showed up? So he built it, ran a clinical study on it, learned more about it, learned more about the problem, rebuilt the solution, tested it again, rebuilt it again, tested it again after he integrated it with Epic and allowed the platform to send notifications to the care team saying, essentially, you're about to see patient Cian in a couple weeks, but he's great. He's doing great. Why don't you consider delaying that visit? Or you saw patient Mark a month ago and he's a train wreck and he's really struggling with pain and he cannot sleep. So this idea of helping the care team know what's going on and create this digital conduit between the patient and the care team, so the care team knows what's going on, they can manage more folks and prioritize the people that need to be seen. It is this problem that I've slowly grown in love with. And the product what we've built, MPro is the name. It's a mobile patient report outcomes platform, allows patients just that. They answer a couple few questions a week, takes about maybe 3 or 4 minutes a week, and it allows the care team to see how they are doing over time. So I don't know if I'm in love with the problem or now I'm in love with the solution, but I think the problem is this enormous problem that today, with today's technology, has become solvable.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you and I and Josh had the conversation of, so adjuvant behavioral health, it's behavioral telehealth right now, specifically for cancer patients, right? Now moving into potentially other chronic diseases. The challenge is that interstitial space between visits.
Yeah.
And then how do you gauge that patient in between those telebehavioral health visits? You know, the next idea is, how do you have an app that gets deployed so that patient Tucker, who's going through, you know, a cancer treatment, is able to check in on a regular basis to say my state of mind, and then create it in a, everybody talks about, oh, it's going to be AI enabled, right? And I'm like, okay, whatever, y'all. When it becomes really AI enabled, is more than just a really good statistical model based on a small little algorithm that says, hey, somebody needs to reach out to Tucker today, or somebody says, okay, good, he's good. I have a heads up dashboard. Well, why do you need that? And what's been proven, and I think your thesis is enables the practitioners, those very limited resources, to focus on those that need the most immediate care. Those are their sickest, those are with the most immediate problems. And B, it gives this patient a feeling that they're engaged in their health, increases quality of that care, and then it also becomes an early warning system, specifically on BH. And what we don't talk about is healthcare is tied to payment models. And so if you're only given, like, you're only allowed to visit with your BH professional once every 2 weeks, and something happens in between, you better have, as the BH provider, documented that they needed to come in sooner. They needed to be seen sooner, so that you're not, you know, if you're in a fee for service, so that you have the documentation to drop the bill. If you're in a value-based care bundle, you can document the fact that you needed to do this, right?
Mhm.
And so, unfortunately, whatever your pin is, somebody's got to get paid to do the things, right? To provide the
Yes.
care, right? And having this type of platform in place is proving very efficacious.
Yeah, I think a couple of great points that you bring out. Our customers are the practices. So if it's a private practice, whether it be a small or a very large cross the nation group of practices, it is a business. And there's someone in that business that's saying, "Hey, we have this problem and we're losing money, we're not able to make money." As a digital health entrepreneur, one could assume that it is the outcome, improving outcomes for the patient, that's driving the decision, or it is potentially improving the overall wellness of the patient. And what I've come to learn, because I walked around with those errors in my head for a long time, was, well, the how does the practice make money? And look, it's a margin thing too. So if you tell the practice they're going to make $50 and they say, yeah, but Mark, it takes me $48 to make that $50. The razor thin margin you might be suggesting may preclude use of or adoption of the product. We talk about the problem, like if you say, hey, this is going to be great for patients, the practice may say, yeah, but how do I continue to make money? How do I continue to at least protect my current margins with your product? And of course, that patient care is is why we're here. But if we don't get paid, we're going to go out of business. Like the company, the company literally goes under and goes away, right?
Right. And haven't been inside health systems for too many decades in some way, shape, or form, and specifically nonprofit health systems, so community and nonprofit health systems. The phrase we used to use is no margin, no mission.
Yeah.
Right. Now, do we
Right.
have to be enormously profitable, and do we have shareholders that we need to report to, and does there need to be a dividend and a distribution? No. What we have to be accountable to is the fact that we've been given this designation and we're providing a valued good to the community, and we're able to still keep our doors open and then take that margin and reinvest it back into the enterprise.
Yeah.
And so you're spot on when you sit there and you say, oh, it takes me $48 to make 50 bucks. Everybody's going to look at that and go, that's not a margin that sustains a practice. It certainly doesn't contribute to the margin of a for-profit enterprise, right? So sometimes it's a solution chasing a problem, right? We've seen all those companies, right? Then we actually see the companies that have created a solution for the problem and still don't have a revenue model. It's very rarely when they've created a solution, it's solving a problem, and it has a defined and known revenue model in which to generate sustainability.
Yeah, and I think going to your earlier point about being able to remotely monitor patients or giving patients the tools to self-report their own trends. I mean, I think that's 100% valid in the primary care field, where you may only be doing a couple of wellness questions a quarter, or pain, dyspnea, nausea, anxiety questionnaires every day, because we know in between the couple of days between your in-person nurse visits, a lot can go sideways. In specialty practice, like an autoimmune disease, you may develop trends over months, but for a patient with a GI disease like Crohn's or inflammatory bowel disease, a flare can really crush you. Or if you're in multiple sclerosis, if you measure your trends over time, you may say, hey, this drug I'm on used to work great, but over the last 4 months, I've just gotten more sore, more fatigued, and I just don't think it's working anymore. So when the care team goes back to the payer and says, hey, drug A is just no longer working, and I'm going to have to go to this potentially more expensive drug B, and the payer says, well, prove it, start having the patient generate a symptoms log, the practice can now say, well, it's right here. Like it's all right here for the last 12 months. See, this was them doing great on your drug for the last 9 months. The previous 9 months, and in the last 3 months, it just has stopped working as well. You're able to keep your finger on the pulse of the patient, whether they be pretty healthy or really approaching end of life.
Spot on. I mean, it's a full range, a full spectrum. And I come back around to, and what you're doing is you're taking this patient-centered outcome reporting initiative, right? You're in many instances trying to shoehorn it into a chronic care management payment model. And then that chronic care management payment model is tied to usually the number of minutes in a 30-day period, right? And so now you're using that to measure and say, hey, look, we pinged this person and this is what we're doing, right? And so then you're able to drop that bill. You're collecting that data to say, hey, outcomes have changed. We need to move them. So now you have that information to better treat and care for that patient. And now I'm going to again switch a little gear here. Historically, these payment models have been fee for service. And for the listeners who don't understand what that means, fee for service means I'm sick, I see the doctor prescribes a medication, a treatment, whatever it is, and then says, okay, go home or wherever, inpatient stay, wherever it is. All along the way, every time that patient sees that doctor, they can drop a bill for it, right? And so if I go in on a Tuesday and I'm like, okay, I'm congested, I have a sore throat, my ears are plugged, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you have strep. And they give you a Z-Pack. And then like 3 or 4 days later, you're worse. And you go in and they've got to do a Z-Pack plus some steroids or a Z-Pack plus something. They get paid in a fee-for-service model, and you're not any better, right? Whereas within a value-based care model, and we know that this is going to be the way folks get paid because the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, came out and said all hospital systems and payers need to be I don't know if it's 70/30 or 60/40, meaning no longer is the primary payment model fee for service. It's going to be value-based care payments, and this is going to be accomplished by 2030. So in 5 years, the American health system has to pivot into getting paid on quality, not on volume.
The joke may be if you jumped in a time machine and got out at any time and asked someone, when will value-based care be here? And someone said, it's right around the corner, you still would have no idea where you were in time, because people have been saying value-based care is happening, is coming. The practice is bearing risk, which is to say that they're on the practice themselves is on the hook for that second visit and that second Z-Pack and that second set of steroids. They may be approaching care and preventative care and patient monitoring and tracking in between those visits in a slightly different way. Because if every time you show up, whether or not you fix the problem, you get paid, you can see how there may be an incentive there to just see as many patients as you can squeeze in.
I hate to say it, it's a huge behavioral paradigm shift,
For sure.
right? We all know, like, hey, we can give you tech and we can put rules in place and we do all the things. It's the humans that are difficult, right?
Right.
You take a doctor and she's been practicing the same way for the last 40 years and suddenly tell her, well, you can't drop a bill that way. You now have to sit there and say, okay, Cian, he's a 56-year-old white male. Oh, by the way, he's got these 3-4 things that are chronic. You're not going to get paid if he crashes into the hospital because we're giving you a per member per month payment because he's in this insurance plan. You're going to get paid because you keep him out of the hospital and you make sure his blood pressure is managed and his cholesterol's in the right range and he's not pre-diabetic. And, oh, by the way, he's seeing his cardiologist because he's got a quirky thing about his heart and, so on and so forth. And what we're also seeing are practitioners leaving practice because of this payment model shift.
Yeah, I think that idea of now I'm on the hook after my patient leaves is for sure a different model. But I think I'll just pause on hospice care for a minute. It's an area that Greencape Health is moving into, and our first hospice provider we've just signed up. And really, when we talk about that model, it's a capitated model. So CMS pays the hospice care provider a fixed amount per day as long as the beneficiary continues to be enrolled with that provider, and the provider must make it happen. So that's whether it be routine home care or respite care or in-home inpatient care, the hospice provider is on the hook to provide that care with that money. And a platform like ours or adjuvants can help that practice optimize their team's time by identifying those patients who may have left the appointment but still aren't well. Before they come back in, they're like, okay, Cian still has that congestion, still has that cough, he's not getting any better, or flag them before the next visit. So if you can imagine a fleet of folks driving around in cars visiting patients that are being provided palliative or hospice care in their homes, if those group of folks aren't exactly sure who they need to see, they may just be on a rotation. So Tucker gets seen Mondays and Thursdays, and Mark gets seen Tuesdays and Fridays, and Cian gets seen Wednesdays and Saturdays. No matter what you're experiencing, that turns out to be pretty inefficient. Where Tucker may be great and the two old guys really need a little extra time, that mobile team can spend more time with us and maybe a little bit of time with Tucker via telemedicine or via no kidding text.
Yeah, 100%. I do think we're going to see a move into that patient-centered asynchronous care. And for the healthy and well equally, right? Not just folks that are chronic diseases or end of life or have a catastrophic illness, right?
Right.
It's going to be more and more moving into that, hey, we're going to allow that patient to send us information. There's going to be a smart system that collects that information, and then it's going to adjudicate a level of engagement with the patient, whether it's, hey, Cian's doing great, these are all the things he's reporting, he needs to come in twice a year, right, for his AWV, right? Or it's like, oh crap, we need to get on the phone with this guy, and then, oh crap, you just need to come in.
the aviation analog, you can imagine this, I think, after flying jets today. So the F-35 replaced the F-18 and the AV-8 in the Marine Corps. The F-35 is very smart and is constantly monitoring itself and is constantly talking to the brain back in the squadron's maintenance shop and saying, hey, I just realized ABC on this system is not working perfectly. And then the maintainers can go in there and say, oh, we need to reset the system, or this component may be aging more rapidly than we thought. And it's really a preemptive strike rather than in the old days, you said, okay, I'm doing inspections based on flight hours or on calendar days, whether or not that airplane needs it or not. So every 10 hours, I'm doing this checklist, which I think has always been important, but the airplane's ability to tell you, I'm not feeling well and come fix this is an analog to what we're trying to do now. So don't just come in for your annual physical or every 6 months because that was the next appointment the doctor had available. But let's communicate with you and allow you to tell us how you're doing. And it could be describe your pain, describe how well you're sleeping, describe how anxious you are when you think about the future, describe how sad you are when you think about the past. When the care team knows how you're doing, then they can provide you the right thing rather than every time they see you, it's like they've never seen you before and they start from the top of the page like, how are you doing?
Yeah, really, the narrowing in on providing the right care at the right time,
Right.
right? Very much so. All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. What is one thing that not everybody knows about you that would be very interesting?
One thing that not everyone knows about me is I asked the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps selected me to be the Italian Navy exchange pilot. So what does that mean? I went to the Italian Navy. I flew the Italian Navy's Harriers with an Italian Navy squadron on an Italian Navy ship. Went to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and with my wife learned Italian enough to pass the test to move forward. And then over the 2 years that I was there, got pretty good at the Italian language. So if you said, what is something about you that not most people know, I think it's that. I lived in Italy for 2 years. I got pretty good at the Italian language, and then subsequently buried my head in books early mornings, nights, and weekends, and learned French. So at the end of it, I was kind of walking around fluent. Only means that I couldn't work professionally in French. I could in Italian when I left Italy, but couldn't do it now. And I could walk around and get stuff done.
My wife and I could have used you most recently. We had good fortune of spending a few days in Tuscany. I am, and Tucker is, half Italian. And
Nice.
so mine was a ham-handed kindergarten knowledge of the language, which I think they appreciated. They laughed a lot. And then they essentially code switched into English and told me, nice try. Honestly, Mark, it's something that I've always wanted to do. You've got English, you've got Italian solidly, and you got some French going on. That's spectacular.
When I got to language school, won't surprise you. I was like, I'm a Harrier pilot. There's nothing I can't do.
I fly planes, therefore
I
I
mean,
can do anything.
I was a pig looking at a wristwatch for about the first 3 months of that class. I literally had no idea what I was doing at all. Only through the grace and the kindness of our Italian language professors that they were able to pry that like how to learn a language door open in my brain, and slowly but surely Italian kind of seeped in.
How did
Um,
that work? Like, I'm up. Did you guys get like Babbel, or did you get some like program, or like I'm just fascinated by it because like for me, when I was in Italy, I was hearing things that I understood, but damned if I could say anything.
it's for sure a thing. Reading the written word is often easier because your eye sees the spaces in between the words and you have some time. Hearing it, your brain has to know enough words to fill in the gaps, put the spaces in between the words. So if you don't know the language, it's just a waterfall of sound. And then finally, you have to be able to know the words well enough to say them back. At language school, they tested everyone to make sure you have a minimum level of language proficiency. So it's a language test that just says, are you able to learn languages? I want to say I got a waiver for that because for my horrific score. They start slowly, and really it's about the whole language rather than I'm going to teach you what words mean or how to conjugate a verb in past or present tense. They're really trying to teach you how to live and work and understand the language. So there's a lot of listen to these phrases, put yourself in these situations and slowly pick it up. And the complexity of the instruction grows, of course, from day 0 to day 180. But that's another thing I think the military knows how to train people on how to learn a language. And if you have these minimum prerequisites, we can get the door open and we'll shove enough language in there to at least let you get there and start really learning once you're fully immersed.
Well, and I think people need to understand that when you're flying a plane and you're flying it and speaking another language, you have to be able to understand that quite quickly.
Yeah, NATO, the working language is English. So we flew in English, but if you wanted to speak clearly to an air traffic controller, sometimes a little bit of Italian helped. As soon as we landed, the whole world in the squadron was Italian. And then of course, we're in the southern part of Italy in the heel of the boot. Everything was Italian. And there were very few English speakers. And it was a lot of work. So that was something people may look at my resume or may look at my background and be like, oh, I would never think that guy lived in Italy for a couple of years and maybe got halfway decent at a couple of foreign languages.
Okay, final question. What is a question that I should have asked you, but I did not?
Well, I think if we think about the entrepreneurs who might be listening, maybe it's a question about pivots. So we talked a little bit about getting a company up and running when you're starting and creating a new market. So maybe you're coming into this market like Josh Meyer did at Adjuvant Behavioral Health and saying, I think I can provide behavioral health services to patients that are going through cancer and cancer-related psychological distress. And maybe that fits and lands perfectly. The market may not know really what you're trying to do. They may know the problem, but they don't really recognize that it is a solvable problem. So in that first bit of customer discovery, where you're bringing, like you said, bring this MVP and bring it out to the first couple customers, we have this little maybe baby revenue. You may look and say, the way we're solving this problem, there's not enough margin for the customer to pay for it, or there's not enough margin for him to have any left over to pay me, or the way our users are using this product, it's not what we had in mind, but it's really solving this other interesting problem that might be more valuable. As you're starting your new company and you're walking into the market with your product, and I think you should be saying, I'm not sure that I have product market fit. I'm not sure I have a perfect ideal customer profile, and I'm here to learn, and either I'll have to make updates to my product, I'll have to make changes to the product, I'll have to improve the product, and I may end up selling it to a different customer with a different sales process or with a different pricing model. Pivoting is you're able to pivot if you walked into the market ready to learn and assuming that you don't know everything. I think being a successful entrepreneur or whatever you're trying to do as a human, you're walking in the door ready to learn and improve, maybe change everything about your business model if you're going to make the thing fly.
Thinking about like how many times we work with companies and we get in there and we roll up our sleeves, all of a sudden we're like, okay, we need to make a quick change. And like one of the companies, that I'm on the board of that I think about all the time, Amper.
Oh,
They
cool.
have somebody who needs laundry done. They have people who want to do somebody's laundry, and they're the platform. They're the multi-sided marketplace that allows that transaction to occur, right? And monetize it. And they went out direct to consumer initially. And the D2C marketplace is an expensive marketplace to enter. Given the last 4 years, maybe 5 years of raising within tough venture capital markets for
Yep.
multiple different reasons, a D2C play would have required tens of millions of dollars while they cut their teeth and perfected their platform on the direct to consumer marketplace, and they still have it, and they have 30 some odd marketplaces across the US, they pivoted and said, we see a signal in some noise going on in the D2C, which are folks who manage vacation rentals. So they come in, and Airbnb and Booking and all these different platforms have allowed entrepreneurs come in and say, hey, Cian, I'll manage your property for you. Hey, Tucker, I'll manage your property for you. Hey, Mark, I'll manage your property for you. And they do all the work. They take that, right? And part of that, all that work was laundry. And so all of a sudden, these people were placing in a direct consumer marketplace a laundry order on the platform when it really was a B2B order. And so after understanding that signal and that noise, they began to refine it and then target specifically these property managers, these folks who own day spas and salons and places like that. Were trying to contract with major laundry companies like Cintas, but they were getting their towels back and they smelled like grease. Why? Because what would happen would be all of the orders would be picked up, and it could be from a restaurant, it could be from a car shop, like it could be from anywhere.
Right.
They got put into the same giant industrial washing machine, wash, dry, folded, and returned.
Right.
And so all of a sudden they came in and they said, well, we won't do that. We will do your load as its individual and own load, creating a multi-sided marketplace, this time between people who want to do the laundry and businesses.
Yes,
Right?
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And you got to keep your eyes open, and you can fall in love with your solution and insist that we're going to make it work, and really be closed to any potential other opportunities. Keeping your head up, your eyes open, your ears open, and be listening allows those doors and opportunities for a pivot to be open for you.
Yeah, you 100%, Mark, 100% accurate. Well, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. It's great to know you all, and I really appreciate what you do and how you help entrepreneurs in the market. I hope someone listens to this podcast is like, oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. And maybe they can avoid some of the things that earned us our haircuts, Cian.
The follically challenged group. That's right.